Hello to everyone listening. Thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to welcome you to the very first episode of the Far From Eden podcast. And friends, I know you're going to love this. As promised, I will be getting into some gray areas with my very first guest, Takhona, as we have an open and vulnerable conversation about her chosen life goal to become the Proverbs 31 woman. Not familiar with it? Don't you worry, she does read it out for us at the beginning. And if you would like to read it yourself, look this up in your Bible or Google it. Now, before I get to chatting with Takhona, just a reminder to subscribe, follow, like, and interact with us as much as you can on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and Facebook. Find all the handles in the comments and links on my social media pages. That said, let's get to this. I guarantee you do want to listen till the end. Hi, Takhona. This is like ultimately my first recording ever of Far From podcast, and I am so excited that I got to have my girl Takhona, who I met in 2016. Was it? Yeah. Yeah. So Takhona and I went to school together. We went to UWC together, and she basically the way she says is that she forced her friendship on me because
yes, I did do that.
Apparently I wasn't the most open person, or still I'm not, but I'm so grateful for that every day because we became really good friends. And I know we only had a year together in person, and we try to keep in touch. And she's a really busy person. You find she's always doing something new, always inspiring me from a distance. So when I came up with this, like naturally, you were one of the first people I thought of, and yeah. So
I'm honored. I'm honored.
Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm just going to ask, I'm just going to start by asking you to introduce yourself and give us a little background before we get into the actual quotes and the reason we're here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I was so excited when you told me about this because at least from what I remember in that like 1 year of our friendship, it was like mostly deep conversations and like talking about things that really made me see the world, myself differently, which is why I forced myself on you because who is she? I want to get to know her. We shall be friends no matter what she says. And I've been, like you said, so grateful for that experience. And I'm so excited to be here. Also really nervous because I know that Michelle can get to the meat of things when she starts digging. Whatever you ask, Michelle, I'm here open-heartedly, and I'm here.
Yeah, because I know when I said the invite, I was like, open and vulnerable is key, because we're really trying to do this to help people, right? And I know the struggle between starting and deciding this is it, and we're so good at that. We're so good at, and we did it a lot during our time together. We would come up with something, she'd rush in my room and she'd be like, this is how we're living now, let's go with it. And I was like, oh, good to go. Love it. And we'll have some long conversation at the cafeteria table about it, and tomorrow it's changed. So
some heated ones.
Yeah, that's some really heated ones. I mean, okay, so to get into it straight away, tell us a bit about your quote, Takhona. I got so excited when I saw it. I even posted it on Instagram. So I think everyone at this point knows that we will be discussing the Proverbs 31 woman. And it's something I have heard of and I'd never actually read until you brought it to me. So what I'm trying to understand is, one, your reason for the choice. And basically, like what brought you to choosing that?
So I guess I'll start with a little context because I feel like this is really grounded, like this topic is really, or at least I want it grounded in my own experience. And so I guess I should have said this before, but I was born and raised in Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, which is a very Christian, like traditionally very traditional background, let me just put it that way, and very Christian. And so I did grow up Christian. Both of my parents really encouraged like going to church, and sort of like finding God and like finding your own relationship, and having your own personal journey with him. But that's not really something that I did, I feel, at that young age. I was just like, okay, my parents said I should go to church, so I'm gonna go to church. And it was only much later when I started to think more deeply about what it is to have a spiritual journey, what it is to have a relationship with someone you cannot even see, and you can never be sure whether they're actually speaking to you or it's like your own imagination. And that happened actually. I feel like after that year I spent in Armenia with you, Michelle, because I've lived all of my life, all 18 years of my life in Swaziland, in a Christian background. And then I moved to Armenia to attend UWC, where I met you. And I don't go to church for the first time in my life. Because firstly, there was like no English to go to.
Nothing. Yeah.
And so for the first time in my life, it was like being uprooted and like very abruptly taken away from this thing that been my whole entire experience. And so I didn't go to church for that entire year, except for like a couple of times when I felt I really needed a word, and so I'd go on YouTube and like maybe watch a sermon or something. But it was during that time that I was like, wow. So having a relationship with God, or whatever you know prefer to call it, is not going to church. Like those two things are very different.
Yeah.
So my mindset shifting. Anyway, not to take this too long. Now, I mean, I go to school in the US, attending university here, and it's a very different, independent experience. I feel like my UWC experience was independent, but still very much a bubble. Like we talk about that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But coming to university in the US, I feel like I've really grown into myself and into my own identity, and I've had a lot of time to think about things. And I just turned 23 like a couple of weeks ago. So it's like dawning on me that, oh my goodness, I'm growing up. All of this is what brings me to this passage in the Bible that I chose, Proverbs 31, specifically the passage about like a woman, like the kind of woman. I mean, I feel like this passage is directed towards men, because it's like, this is the type of wife you should be looking for. In the ways that I've heard it being taught to me is like, oh, this is what you should aspire to. This is the woman that you should aspire to be. So I'm going to read from the Message version, which is a very watered down, like simple version, but I feel like it's the best place to start. So Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 31. Is it okay if I read the whole passage? It's going to take like 2 minutes.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll read it quickly. A good woman is hard to find and worth far more than diamonds. Her husband trusts her without reserve and never has reason to regret it. Never spiteful, she treats him generously all her life long. She shops around for the best yarns and cottons and enjoys knitting and sewing. She's like a trading ship that sails to faraway places and brings back exotic surprises. She's up before dawn, preparing breakfast for her family and organizing her day. She looks over a field and buys it. Then, with money she's put aside, plants a garden. First thing in the morning, she dresses for work, rolls up her sleeves, eager to get started. She senses the worth of her work, is in no hurry to call it quits for the day. She's skilled in the crafts of home and hearth, diligent in homemaking. She's quick to assist anyone in need, reaches out to help the poor. She doesn't worry about her family when it snows. Their winter clothes are all mended and ready to wear. She makes her own clothing and dresses in colorful linens and silks. Her husband is greatly respected when he deliberates with the city fathers. She designs gowns and sells them, brings the sweaters she knits to the dress shops. Her clothes are well made and elegant, and she always faces tomorrow with a smile. when she speaks, she has something worthwhile to say, and she always says it kindly.
Mm-hmm. Do you know? You know, the night you sent this to me, I read it over the phone with my mom actually, because I was like, oh, it's about to be my time with Jesus. She's like, oh, what are you reading today? I was like, Takhona sent me this thing, and then I read it with her, and it's also the first time she had ever read it. And the entire time I would read line by line, and I was like, okay, this is my mom, and this is exactly what she's represented without knowing it my entire life, right? And then it got me to thinking. So it's very easy to imitate that behavior, sort of. So you quite think you're there, but then something also struck me with that, and maybe that's something that you'll get into later on. But the essence of the husband is respected. And even the beginning of Proverbs 31 describes the king first before it actually describes his wife. So it describes a lot of behavioral things like don't drink too much, or yeah, just in terms of even giving and giving of your time and your space and so on. So yeah, I guess to get into it, I wanted to know from your perspective, when you do look at this and you start on it, is it something that's like very much for you to work on, or does it get you thinking about maybe the type of, I don't know, men that you want to set yourself up with? Do they lead you to become that person, or is it a very internal sort of dynamic?
I see it from two different perspectives, this passage, and I've wrestled with it just these past couple of months, and all of the time that I've had to myself to sort of think about it. I think the first time I read this, I was actually really young. Like, my mom is one of the most, I admire her as a Christian and also as a believer and as a prayerful woman. Like, she's a person that I look up to a lot. And so obviously, like, she introduced me to this passage, and it's not something that was new to me. But when I read it again in the past couple of months, I actually wrote in my journal, dated 24 January 2021. I wrote this in my journal. And I basically listed all of the things that really stood out to me in the passage. And this line that I wrote, I will actually read from my journal so that, like,
yeah.
I'm putting the receipts. So all of these things, blah, blah, I'm one who fears the Lord. I said, God, make me all of these things. And then at the end, I said, even before the husband and the children, make me all of these things. And so that's the first part of my answer, right? Like, when I first read this passage and when I read it again recently, I was like, wow, I really do aspire to be all of these things. Like, because they are all things, even when you take out the husband and you take out the marriage and the children, these are things that I feel would make me a better person. Like, getting up, doing the things that need to be done, feeding myself for now, because I'm a family of one currently. But like, if I do grow and have a bigger family, like feeding my family. And to me, this woman, Proverbs 31, she's a woman who gets things done, and not just arbitrary. It's like there's an intrinsic motivation there. There's a source of motivation that's very internal. Like, she knows who she is and she knows what she has to do, and it comes from within. And so when I wrote that in my journal, I was like, God, make me like that. Because I'm not, new to hard work. I've done those things before. I've been hardworking, but I cannot really say whether that motivation was sincere and pure and it came from within. Like, it came from pressures. Like, I know I have to do well because my family expects me to do well. I know I have to do well because there's an exam. I know I have to do well because, all of these things. But I don't know if it, it was like internal, really intrinsic motivation. And so when I wrote that, I was like, God, make me all of these things, but let it come from within. And I know, having grown up in a Christian family, that the only purest thing that comes from within is the Spirit of God. So I guess I'm going to search that. Like, it's very, like, the steps in my head are very clear. Like, I know where the Spirit comes from. I know how to search for it. It's in the Word of God, all of these things. That's the first part of my answer. The other part of my answer is that I feel like also this comes from being in a virtual world and remote world. this productivity culture has really got me thinking. Like, we're always working 9 to 5, actually more than 9 to 5, spending so many hours almost mindlessly working. And if you read this passage from that perspective, you're like, okay, this woman gets up very early, does all of these things, super productive. Is that?
It's like, I'm doing the right thing. So my movement is just keep going. Yeah.
Like almost ticking things off of a list. And I'm like, I want my life to be more than that. I want my life to have meaning. I don't want to just mindlessly do things. So it all just comes back to that motivation. Like, what is my motivation? Is it the husband? No, please no. There's a time that comes for that. Like, I want my motivation to come from within, because I know if it comes from within, it cannot run out. But if I put it on, I want to get married, if that's my motivation, that will quickly run out. So those are the two parts of my answer. Feel free to pick apart any
whichever one. I mean, the aspect I find interesting is the one you brought up towards the end, where it's like, there's an extreme work culture, and like, knowing you the way I do, like the one thing that I can't take away from you is you are a hard worker. Be it even the days that you think you haven't accomplished enough, you're accomplishing way too much by any standard, right? Like, you're an extremely hard worker, and it's something I can relate to as well, that like, never stopping, let's keep going, And I recently actually came across something by Stephen Furtick, where he was talking about that, like the rest aspect. And it was the first time it had ever been preached to me like that, because he was talking about the time when Jesus stopped by the well and he bumped into that prostitute. And Jesus it was the first time he pointed out to me that Jesus was actually resting, like he was thirsty. So he was basically saying just the Son of Man needed to rest, not to go too spiritual with it, but you get what I mean, the essence of like the need for rest. And it's, in this passage particularly, it doesn't sound like it's there. But what I am getting from it, and I think you almost answered this very well when you were talking about the motivation factor, she's not just moving. There's nothing that she's doing that's like, this doesn't have a purpose in the day. She's planting things because her kids need to eat. She's sewing clothes for the winter because people need to be warm. She's waking up at dawn because people need to be fed. There's almost a very clear thing of like, this needs to be done because of this. So everything ultimately has a reason. So that motivation factor that you're talking about. And I think what I want to ask from all of this is, how do you now move that from like a spiritual motivation to like a practical motivation? What are the things that you're coming across that make you question? Like, it's one thing to pray to God and say, make me this. And then as you're going through it, you don't even know, sometimes particularly, which triggers in your day, or which little things that are popping up in your day that you should be paying attention to, that will make you that woman that you want to come across. So basically the question is more, how do you now filter that? How do you stop mistaking, I guess, movement, like constant movement, for progress, and like know that this is a motivation to actually produce something, and this is just a motivation to keep me going and just keep me moving? Yeah.
That is such a good question. Because I think what you're really getting at is like, there's so much distraction, There are a lot of things, and sometimes I feel like, okay, distraction might not be such a fair word to use, but there are so many other things that like take our attention, and it's hard to figure out, okay, is this something that I should really be spending my time and energy on? Or is this like something I can put away and like, not focus on right now? But so I read this quote one time, I cannot remember the exact wording, but it was like, what you are doing now is essentially what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So in terms of like how you live your life and like how you spend your days, because I think we have such a planning culture, like 5 years from now, I'm going to, be working this job. This is who I'll be. I'll be eating better. I'll be exercising more. I'll be, I'll be doing all of these things.
Yeah.
But what the quote was saying is how you're spending today is how essentially you're training yourself to spend your days 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Mhm.
Michelle, when I read that, my whole world.
Well, it just collapses. So that
I looked at my life, honestly, and I was like, do I really want to wake up at 12, 1 p.m. every day? Do I want to miss breakfast all the time because I woke up too late? Do I want to feel grumpy all the time because my body's stiff and I'm not exercising enough? Like, do I want to feel this way? Like, do I want to feel the sadness that comes from not doing the things that I told myself I do? I'm not talking about things that I told other people I do. Like simple things I told myself I do. Like, I'll wake up and study tomorrow.
Yeah,
and then
the guilt.
The guilt and sadness that comes from that. I honestly looked at myself and I was like, do I want to live my life like this? Like even 5 years from now? And so going back to your question about like filtering through the day, I have that mindset, or at least I'm trying to have that mindset of like, is this a culture, a habit that I want to cultivate for who I am today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now? So like if something's happening in the day and my reaction, for example, something that I'm not particularly proud of, is like, is that a reaction I want to, do I want to be known for that reaction? Do I want to be known for this habit? And I guess that's just the way that I'm trying to structure my mind. But I loved when you first approached me with this podcast idea, I loved how you sort of put it in stages, that it's like in the first stage, you see the person that you want to become, but you're not yet there. Or the second stage, you're working towards that. Or the third stage, you feel like you're already living that stage of your life. I'm very much in the beginning. I'm like, even when I sent this to you, I was like, who is this Proverbs 31 woman? I want to be her. Show me the rule book. Like, what do I need to do? Because I think I'm very much still an infant in terms of like creating the habits and cultures and traditions that I want to keep in my life that become a part of the person that I am. So, that was a very long one.
No, it makes so much sense. It does make so much sense because like I like how you're like selecting what you want to battle with. So on a daily basis, it's like, okay, I'm picking these little habits or these little things that are coming out of my mouth, and these little, because that's how you have to take it, right? And like bite-sized chunks, because it's very hard, like you're saying, to just wake up and be this person. And to some extent, you also read it and you're like, I'm already this person. Like I can already wake up at dawn. I'm just choosing not to. But then when you start saying that, okay, now let's choose to be this person, you realize that there's way more to it than just the essence of just waking up and moving. Because for you, in order, and you said it correctly before, in order for you to wake up every single day and be that, there needs to be a definite motivation. And I think it now comes down to what you're saying, where you've read one quote and then now a bunch of other quotes are now coming into it to basically structure where your motivations are going to come from, and like the whole shebang. So basically my next question now would be, how, like what's the feeling, like what are the different feelings that now come up as you're trying to do it? As in, because like you said, sometimes you wake up and you decide, I don't want to wake up at 12 o'clock anymore, and then you find the next day, I want to wake up at 6 or 7 or whatever your big goal is, but you wake up at 10 instead. what I want to get a better picture of now is like the different stages of the different feelings as it comes to be like, almost, I know there's probably times you feel like you're letting yourself down, but there's also the understanding of the growth, and then also trying to strike the balance between not understanding yourself too much. But basically go into that.
I loved when you brought up the word guilt, because it's a very real feeling that comes from not doing the things you had told yourself you were going to do. And so honestly, that's one of the feelings that like I have to deal with. But at the same time, I've just, and this has only happened like later, so in my 20s, learning to be kind to myself, and like treating my own self with empathy and like sympathy, and realizing that this is not easy. Like this life thing, whoever wrote this quote, so much. There's so much going on. There's so much going on. And I already had this like mindset even before 2020. So I'm not even going to go into, what it means to be alive in this time right now, even just like before. It's not easy. There's so much that's going on. And especially our generation, like when I look at how my parents grew up and like how I'm growing up, there's a lot more things that I'm exposed to that I need to fight back, like social media, that the sort of the pressure that comes from like seeing other LinkedIn. Oh my goodness. I
hate that app so
I hate it so much because people are always like, oh, social media is so bad. It creates so much pressure. But like LinkedIn is the real devil, in my opinion, especially for people that have set their lives around goals that they want to achieve. And so constantly seeing other people achieve their goals when you feel like you're stagnant, the guilt, the feeling of guilt, the feeling of inadequacy. And for me, because I'm in a place that's far away from home, it's like the feeling of imposter syndrome. Like, why am I here? What am I doing here? Like, what makes me think I can do all of the things that I've come here to do? And so there's all of these feelings. And on the opposite side of that, it's just me trying so hard to be kind to myself and like giving myself space to make mistakes, to grow, to realize that like I'm not the person that I was a month ago. Like there is progress that's happening. It's just not visible all the time to me. And so it's like going back to my passage, in a sense, this Proverbs 31 woman is my Eden, right? Like this is the place that I'm trying to get to. But I'm so far, Michelle.
Oh, I like how you split that in.
I'm so far. And like between that space of like who I want to be and who I am right now, all of these feelings of guilt and inadequacy and just not being the person that I want to be yet, it's difficult. And so the way that I try and like fight that back is the feeling of kindness, because I think we talk a lot about being kind to others, especially if in the Christian environment, it's like, oh, always be kind to others. What would Jesus do? But it's like, what would Jesus do to himself? Like like you said, he rested. He took some time to take care of himself. And so I think it's just that constant struggle. It's like all of these bad feelings and then these feelings of like kindness, and I'm like trying to pour into myself as well so that I can pour out to others. But it's a struggle.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, the imposter syndrome thing, it really hits. And I would say in general, like everything you're saying is very relatable in terms of like waking up and just feeling like I'm letting myself down because I'm not already there. I'm not already that person. But what I wanted to get more into as well is what are the things like, so there are different things that make us feel like we're not that person, or the different things that give you, like you said, in your case, imposter syndrome. And to make sure that we get the most out of this, I would say, after you make a decision like this, right? After you put this up on your wall, you rightfully say the world is very different and it's moving very differently, probably at a time than you are, right? So social media is moving very differently. And you look at it, and you look at the Proverbs 31 woman, and then you think of even a movement like feminism, which it seems like contradictory to. And at the same time, like I know you, and I know how you identify strongly with the movements and so on. And then you look at something like this, and on surface level, it's like, this is a person who's very like sacrificial, just sacrifice. And then it's almost like you don't know whether you're trying to teach yourself how to be the sacrificial lamb in the family, or or you don't know whether you you are trying to teach yourself to be the rock of the family, which has also been phrased as almost like a sacrificial lamb in a way. It's no longer glorified to be the rock or to be the strength. And I know at the beginning you did say you're trying to make this, like, make yourself into this before you take it out anywhere else in the world. But these are some of the things that I think if I was to say I'm taking it on, would be would also become problematic to me, would make me tired, would make me feel the imposter syndrome, because there's no one I can discuss it with, because everyone would look at me like, because even a thing like wanting to be married in our generation now is almost, why would you want to do that to yourself? It's almost like you're tying yourself down to a rock. So in essence, how do you navigate that, and knowing that this is a very, like, almost a thought that would never have come to you if you were in a group, if you were always constantly in a group of people. It's a thought that came to you in private for a reason, because the rest of the world is not moving that way. And social media is not moving that way. And people in private are probably moving that way, but no one's brave enough to say it. So how do you navigate your energies around the social media, like you mentioned, LinkedIn, goal setting, and so on, and the overall imposter syndrome that you feel from just being where you are and where you know you want to be, what you know is what's going to be fulfilling for you? Yeah.
So the way that I've thought about getting to that place where, you know, I feel like, okay, this is the person that I promised myself I want to be, and like getting to that place of being the person that I want to be. I have realized, and this is going back to my point about motivation, I have realized that the only way that sticks, like the only way like you can truly work towards that, even on the days when it's difficult and even on the days that you don't want to do it, is being convinced internally of why you're doing the thing that you're doing. And that creates the foundation upon this whole house that is your being is going to be built. Because if you don't have that foundation of why am I doing this, that why, like, why do I want to wake up and be the woman who makes clothing and like plants seeds? Like, why do I want to be that? And so for me, those steps, at least that one big step, has been about defining that why. Like, why do I want to do all of these things even before I start doing them? Because it's easy to just like wake up and like, okay, I'm gonna start going to the gym. I'm gonna start, you know, eating better. But it's like, unless you have that why of why you're doing it, you're going to be shaken, right? Because there isn't that strong foundation. And back to your question in terms of like the world now, because the world will define these things very differently. You know, the people that are like, I think you already touched on this a bit, and like looking at this like, oh no, I'm a feminist. Like I don't any of these things. I don't want to do any of these things. And I think that's completely fine. Like, we are allowed to see things differently and hold different opinions. The only way that you are going to be able to stand up straight in that conversation and be like, yeah, I identify with feminist values as well, but I also still want to be this person, is only if you've defined that why. Because if you haven't, that conversation is going to crush you. Someone's going to ask you, why would you want all of these things that have systemically been used to oppress women? Like, why are you working towards a goal that like still objectifies women and only sees them as a means to an end? You're going to be dumbfounded. You will, oh wow, I actually, you know, I don't know. And so for me, in the closed space when I'm alone, this is the thing that I'm thinking about. Like, what is my why? Like, why, what is the thing that I feel like is the real reason that would help me stick to this? And the answer is, I don't have the full answer yet. You know, like I don't know. I cannot say, oh, this is it and it's not going to change. It's set in stone, because I don't know if you can even get to that place. But for me, it's really about at least having enough reasons that will make me want to keep doing it. And so one of them is being happy. And for me, happiness is doing the things that I set out to do and like being honest with myself, and also rewarding myself for the things that I've done. Like for me, when I'm truly happy, it's when I made a to-do list and I did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
personal. That's
Yeah.
personal. Not everybody feels that way. But I've realized that I do gain happiness and satisfaction from that. And so for me, the person I want to be is a person who does the things they promise themselves they do. And so small things that I have to do is working towards that. It's like, how do I get to that place? And still taking all of the necessary, precautions, like rest and being kind to myself. And so my short answer is that personal why. Like, what is your why? And if you have that, you can be on social media and be unshaken. Like you can scroll through LinkedIn and like and still feel proud and like solid in the determinations and convictions that you have. But it's a process. I don't think it's a destination. It's also cliche. It is the journey. Like I don't think one can get to the place where they're like, oh, nothing moves me anymore. Like I'm so solid. It's honestly a process. I don't have it all figured out yet.
And I think that's the interesting thing about choosing something so loaded as well, because there's a lot of I look at that, the Proverbs, the 31 woman, and I like how you say, it comes back to your why, and how your why is always changing. And I look at that chapter and it's very loaded. Like your why is, there's so many different reasons that you would want to be that person, because it can be, for now, we're still navigating that period where we don't even know whether we eventually want to be wives or mothers, or you know what I mean? But it kind of gives you that ability to say that if that's what I decide I want to be, I am fully ready for that because I have the qualities, right? Or if I just decide that for the rest of my life, I want to be chasing the dream or the goals or whatever it is, however you want to phrase it, I am that person. Like there's character that I'm building. There's the ability to sacrifice. There's the ability to wake up at the same time every day and push and push and push and push, and maybe not to quit when the going gets rough.
Because it does.
But what I want to ask you as well, though, is how do you ever feel like there's these more natural inclinations that you have that maybe sometimes combat the things that you have set yourself up to do? So I don't know, do you ever find that you're well on your way and you think you finally structured it, and then you get used to doing it in isolation? Because it's one thing, you get really used to focusing on being this person when you're alone, and then I don't know, you meet someone new and they show you a different either lifestyle, or start to show you that what maybe you thought was going on, what you thought that you were constructing yourself in the right direction, is kind of there's room for improvement and so on. And how do you navigate that? How do you decide, even if it's not a person, even if it's another trigger, but how do you decide that this thing is taking me away from the goal and this thing is correcting me? How is it how does that dynamic work?
Wow, Michelle. This question is so interesting to me because the way, and this is bad, but like the way that I have sort of known in the past that something was taking me away from the goals that I had set is because it blew up in my face. Like I saw it to the end. It's like literally choosing, like when you get to like a forked road and like choosing this road and you're so convinced it's still going to where you set out to go, and it's like dead end. It's a dead end. And I think your question is essentially saying, before you actually even take that road, while you're still at that crossroad, how do you decide whether this is the thing that like will help you be that person, is going to take you away from the person that you want to be? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Not even, like, essentially, yes, I would hope that we know before, but I'm very much like you in the sense that I've always had it blow up. So I'm trying to understand from different people's perspectives if that's just the way. Because some people know from the minute that they come across something or meet someone that this is not it. And I don't know if maybe you're just like deeper in the journey than maybe I've come to be when things come to me, or there's actually a reason to go down that road and there's something to take out of it. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, does the blowing up, because there's always a lesson to learn, right? Like, I think we've both had conversations after a big thing happens to us, like a heated love affair or something.
Yeah.
And we're both very excited. And then we talk about it a few months or a couple of years later, and we're like, it's actually not there anymore. And we reflect on it and we're like, okay, there's this that you can extract, and that's great. But still, sometimes I find that it's maybe taken me so far away from where I was before. Like, there was a level of satisfaction I had there, and now I'm back to trying to rebuild that. And so basically what I'm trying to ask you is, are there triggers, do you think, that you find? And I think people call them red flags in a way, but sometimes they're not. I don't know. I just think red flag is a very flimsy term for what I'm trying to get at. Yeah. But like, do you feel it? Or is it just?
I see what you're getting at. And it's interesting because, so I'm gonna take it back to my mom. My mom is a very prayerful woman. And one thing she always says is that, like, she feels things in her spirit that direct her, that help her, see whether something is going to be helpful, or sort of like have that foresight, right? Because that's essentially what I'd like to have, is like, if this is a new, I don't know, like adventure coming into my life, or like even a new person, a new relationship, the best thing to have would be like being able to see whether it ends well or it ends up blowing in my face, and then I'd know, right? I'd like strategize and be like, okay, let's not do it. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Okay, like we don't have the power to see how something ends, and so we are stuck with that decision. Is like, do I want to do it anyway? Like, risk all of it? But my mom, like, she swears, like, she'll feel things in her spirit. Like, even when she meets a new person, she'll feel things in her spirit that, like, tell her, or like sort of give her a clue. And in other circles, this is just, I mean, what do they, like, your conscience, like your conscience tells you. It's your gut. Like, you'll feel something in your gut and you're like, this doesn't feel right. And so for me, I know it's super spiritual and like not something that I can fully define. But for me, it's been trying to cultivate that part of myself that will tell me those things, you know? And like, and sometimes, I mean, there's a ton of research about like mindfulness, about like people who meditate and how they're able to sort of like push away the clutter. It's like
the energy.
Like, you know, when you meet a new person, you're like super excited about a new relationship and your mind almost feels foggy. And so these people that like are super into meditation, mindfulness, and the whole point of that is to clear the fog, right? To be able to get you to think clearly. And for me, honestly, this is where I'm at right now, Michelle, because like whatever it is, whether it's like a voice in the ear or like an angel over my shoulder, I want it. I want it because I'm so tired of having things blow up in my face that I want to kind of know before. And I mean, it can look a lot of different ways. I feel like if you are truly in tune with who you are and with your environment, and the things around you. And if you truly listen, like, I feel like if you pause and like listen, and that's essentially meditation. There's a lot of wisdom that comes from silence and just being still. And I wish I could have that, like, especially whenever I meet a new person, I wish I could have that because my mind gets so foggy. I think I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, I want to think with a clear mind now, and have a clearer mind when it comes to decisions like this. And so you use the word triggers. Like, are there any like triggers that I'll see that will sort of like give me a sign? Sometimes I do feel things in my gut and I still do it anyway. The way that you are, because we're human, right? And it's like, oh, I wanna, I kind of feel, and so I don't want to do that anymore. And at the same time, I want to cultivate the part of me that honestly is going to exercise like good decision making. But yeah, I don't think I know we said we weren't going to use red flags. But one thing that I do, and this is specifically tied to like relationships and even friendships, I've realized that people that I am not at peace or like fully myself when I'm around them, that to me is maybe not a red flag, but like a yellow flag.
Yeah.
Because I realized that if I'm constantly trying to be a different version of myself whenever I'm around you, that I'm going to do that so much one day that I'm going to be
that I can't recognize myself. Yeah.
Yes. Like you said, like sometimes you realize that you're so far down the wrong path. It's so hard to come back. For me, the sign for that is usually when I'm like trying to be someone that I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, or like trying to be as cool as they are or like as funny as they are. And so that they think a certain way of me. Like when I start doing that in my mind, I'm like, that's a yellow flag. That's not something that
that's not it.
Because I feel like people that like truly impact our lives in a positive way are the people that allow ourselves to fully be who we are and like at peace with that. But that's just one small trigger that I've noted from my past.
Because I know we've that's a very good thing to look at, because I know we've noted, and this happens a lot when you're in construction phase. I know we've noted quite a few things. We've had conversations. Our more not recent one, but like the last, I think, conversation that we had tied to relationships, the two of us, there was a lot of, I remember we spoke about our UWC backgrounds and how they make us slightly more, it wasn't argumentative, but more prone to like wanting to debate stuff more openly. And it was very difficult to navigate that in the dating space now, where any form of like provoking or anything is like, oh, you're fighting me. And and I think it's harder to navigate in the building phase. And I'm glad you brought it up, because you're still not really sure. Like you said, the motivations change. And it's almost like sometimes you see this thing that becomes your new motivation and you think, oh gosh, okay, maybe I should be shifting. Because it's not like it comes in the form of a snake or anything. It's not that, like, it's not always painted in that thing. And like you're saying, trying to cultivate your spirits to feel it is a really good thing, because the actual essence of whatever your distraction turns out to be, it's not always painted in the color red. Neither is it very easy to see, like, from a physical perspective. And it usually actually makes you want to be the person you already are, not the person you're striving for. So maybe the person that you're like, you're uncomfortable with, but is already there, so it's easier to fall into. Right. And then obviously, and that's why I brought up even the social media thing and the and how things are going, because the woman that you're describing, like from the Proverbs 31, is far from the woman, and I brought this up earlier when I was saying the king, is far from the woman that's typically praised in our society nowadays. I'm having more and more conversations with like guys who are getting into their like 30s, like towards their 30s, so they're mid 20s now, and they seem to now be looking at it like, they're trying to get back in the dating scene, and it seems like everything now is, what can you give me? What can you give me? And they're uncomfortable with that. And they're uncomfortable with that. But then there's this one that I see describes this Proverbs 31 woman, which is what they're now more like describing. But we also live in a society where, like you say, the motivations have changed. So all along, people have been growing with these motivations, which have been our motivations for a while. And you're lucky enough to have isolated yourself to pick up a new motivation, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if these are the common motivations, it means that the common triggers will be people that are coming from those motivations. Do you see what I mean? So like the importance of the king now And the king for me, I don't even mean just a person. I just mean the things that you will be giving your energy to that actually deserve it. You
Mm-hmm.
know? So yeah, so that I think that's what I'm trying to get at, where it's like you work on yourself so much and then come to that point where you are what you should be for that king that's described. But how do you pick out the king? And you did mention like someone that you can be yourself around, or things that you can be fully yourself around. But when you're in building phase, it's very hard to even know who the self you think what you need.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
It's like, and also like who I want to be can evolve. I think that's one thing that I'm trying to keep in my mind is that like as I meet new people and learn new things about myself, that place can evolve, right? And actually be a better version than what I had set out. But how do I pick up the king?
How do you handle the guilt of meeting a king? Or and I say, like before, I said king can be a person or it can be something else, but like picking up a king, that's very different from the direction that you thought you wanted to go in. There's also guilt that comes with that. Like I remember getting into a relationship and the guy looked very different from what I always thought like I wanted to be with. And initially there was a sense of guilt where it's almost like you're letting the picture, the idea that you had down. Right. And not to say that he was like down, like below my standards in any way. It's just I was working towards this and he kind of seems like the opposite. Yeah. Yeah. So that feeling of guilt as well is something that you have to navigate. So I'm just like wondering how you work around that, or how you think you would work around that when the time comes.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's part of my answer. Do you believe in manifesting?
In manifestational things, yeah. So I do believe that you attract what you're thinking about. I think life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So maybe I don't use the word manifestation, but I do think that if I believe something's doomed to end, I either act too desperately or too carelessly for it. And then either way, push it away from me, like whichever one I decide to go with. So yes.
Michelle, the king that I want, I can see him in my mind's eye.
Oh, okay.
Like I can tell you the way that they speak, like the things that motivate them. Like I know I sound like I'm out of my mind.
No. This is very interesting.
I promise you, I can see what it is that they, I mean, not physically per se, but it's like, what they think about, what they're passionate about, what they're motivated by, what it is about them that gets me super excited and like motivated. Like what I'd like them to be like, essentially. And so it's like in my mind's eye, from just based on experience, having experiences that have not been the thing that I wanted or like have blown up, I've picked out these qualities that I really, really liked. And things about these people that I really liked, and sort of like fed them into what I hope my king is. And that also goes in terms of like job wise, like in terms of like jobs, it's like all of the internships that I do, it's like I pick out the things that I like and I sort of in my mind create what it is my dream job would be like what I would want the work environment to be like. And even friendships, like I've had friendships that have died and like, you know, dropped off along the way because we grow apart and you grow into a different person. But that doesn't mean I haven't collected things from those friendships that are like, wow, like these qualities are so great to have in a friend and I'd like to have them in the future. And so that's literally how my mind works right now. It's like, even those things that did blow up in my face, they were not a lost cause. It's like I learned things from that. And for me, the best way to learn is to pick out the things that I really liked and sort of feed them into like my king, right? But the question now is, like, will I ever even meet them? You know? What happens if I meet someone who looks nothing like that, but I'm super taken by them? Like, what do I do? Situation. Or sometimes you meet someone that's totally different from everything you had set out, but it feels right. Like in the moment when you're making that decision, it like feels right. And like, to be honest with you, I'm not completely sure what I'd do in that situation, but I think it's helped just to give me direction for now, at least, have that like mental image. And so also going back to, I think, a part of your question, it's like when you meet a king and they're not the person that you had hoped for, and like the guilt of like being wrapped up in all of that. I guess the way I sort of like help lessen that is like, oh, I did gain a valuable lesson from this, and I did gain qualities that I feel like in the future I can look for in someone that, you know, I'd really want to be with, or in like a job I'd really want to have, or like the kind of life I'd want to have. But yeah, my answer to your question is super like all over the place, because that's
no, I get it. Yeah.
How my mind is currently at the moment. But I want to hear what you think. Like, what's your perspective
on my question? Gosh,
yes.
You know, when you ask things that you haven't made a decision on. So I agree with you in the sense of like being able to decide what you want first. I think that was a huge issue for me, like in previous contexts where I knew more of what I didn't want than what I wanted. So and you're almost, if we're going to use your term, manifesting the opposite of what you don't want, which is not always accurately what you want. So you kind of know, I don't know, for example, I want someone who doesn't cheat. Fine. So there's someone who doesn't cheat, someone who doesn't lie. Okay, there's someone who doesn't lie. But then what do they actually do? Right? And now I am at that point where it's more, it's less about like you're saying, the like practical, oh, he earns this amount, this, that, blah, blah, blah. Like I truly don't believe in that. I think you can work with someone as long as you're like, you have character, which I think is a problem in itself as well, because I always had like the openness to give everyone an opportunity, right, to just become the best version of themselves. But I think what I'm starting to understand now, and maybe what I'm trying to manifest in a way, is someone who is already ready to be the best version of themselves and is navigating, yes, like the evolution of their character and so on, but is not necessarily piggybacking on my character for their redemption. Does that make sense? Because we work very hard on this, and that's the thing. It's a rare trait. The more I think about it, I've always said that, oh, like, this is basic. Like what you're talking about, we talk about it, and I've surrounded myself with women like you, and it seems like it's a very basic thing that you think like this, that you want to be the best of yourself for someone else as well, right? But it's actually not. There's some people who really do just want to be the best of themselves for themselves or for other people and not bring it to you, which is a very hard reality to come to terms with. But I think, to put it shortly, I'm more riding your wave, where it's not necessarily a list of traits for me anymore. It's more like, where are you like working on becoming the best version of yourself, like alone? And do you have the ability to do so in isolation, whether I'm there or not, whether this is there or not, whether that's there or not, and come to me and just want to like give me that, like, are you able to put in the work when things get hard for us to get there, like, and just keep fighting for it? Do you know what I mean? And not necessarily taken by changes in environment, because that's a huge one. Like, environmental changes are massive, and you're working so hard on disciplining yourself against that. And by the time that you do come across this king, you'll be in a different place. Right now, you're in beginning stages. So if you were to come across it, maybe you'd be a little more swayed by what or not. But given that you're in the middle stages, you've already come so far. You really don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're with someone who's so swayed by the environment that every time they turn, you turn with them. And all of those things are really important. And I would say, that's what it's coming down to me. Coming down to for me. And it's the energy thing you're talking about, where you're trying to see that you can see that. And I think decided people are very easy to detect. In a way. I think we lie to ourselves quite a lot, like saying that, oh, in a month or so they'll be decided. I think from the moment you meet someone, like indecision shows. And what I'm trying to like another issue that's going to pop up maybe for other people later in life is what happens when like their energy is okay, but like the environmental energy is not. Like that's another thing as well. And I think actually working on seeing that from the get-go, like are you also a different person around me than you are around other people? Because maybe that's me not being able to match it for you. Do you get what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah.
just
I love that so much. That idea
yeah.
of like looking for someone who is like ready or like already in that journey of like
Yeah.
being the best of themselves, because that's a motivation for you as well to like keep being on that journey. And when two people meet that are like that, that's it's radical, right? Because it's like I'm constantly working on myself, you're constantly working on yourself, and like together we're like two people. It's a partnership. I love
Exactly. Yeah.
relationships, partnerships now.
Yeah.
And like calling someone your partner, like this is my partner, we're doing this thing together.
Yeah.
Wow.
And more often than not, like you find that if you don't find that, you end up being at war with someone. So maybe you're like fighting for us and they're fighting for just them, and you end up it creates a war. So yeah, I think that's vital. So that's why I brought up the trigger thing, because I was like, yeah, there are things that you can really make by yourself decision wise, and it can be anything from a partner, from friends, whatever it is. And it can be a post that gets you so far gone.
Those happen.
Yeah.
Those happen. But yeah. I mean, in terms of like the passage, for me, I'm like honestly trying to keep it in mind, because I realize sometimes we get so busy that we even like forget some of the things that we had set out to do.
Yeah.
But in terms of like looking at this woman and like honestly wrestling with her as well, it's like all of these things may not apply exactly to the kind of life that I want to have. And so it's like, how can I make it personal? And like I wrote in my journal, before the husband, before the children, like this is a me journey for now, and it's very like personal and internal. And I think it's like very much what you're saying as well. It's like firstly someone who's already working on themselves, meeting someone else who's like that, and then together create something beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think basically that brings us to the end of the discussion. Yeah, I think it's been very rich, and I'm like, I have so many thinking points now. I'm just like, oh, gosh.
We never have enough time, Michelle. That's the problem.
No, we never have enough time. And I'm just thinking, okay, just to conclude, like my final question would maybe be, like picking out. You mentioned one critical thing, and I wanted to let it go at this point, but I'm like, it might be it might be rude for me to do that, but like picking out the elements that you want to be, and that's big for any decision that we make of philosophy. It's very easy to just copy and paste it when it doesn't actually work. So yeah, basically, like, how do you think you're now like trying to fit it with your practical day to day? Because Takhona, when I say Takhona is a busy woman, I mean it. Like she's either working on some like science, medical journal, or or she's speaking at places. Like I've seen you post stuff on Instagram where you're speaking or you've written stuff. Or so yeah, from like in your practical day to day, how do you fit that with your character building? I know with this one it seems pretty straightforward, but in essence it's not. Sometimes you do get busier doing things than like as busy building your character. Yeah.
My short answer, because I'm going to try and be very short, is firstly doing things with a clear mind, with a clear motivation, and with a clear plan. This is how I try and like tackle my days now. It's like in the morning, I have a clear mind. Whatever happened yesterday, it hurts. I'm still hurting, but today's a new day for me to create something else and to get a different outcome. And so that's like something that I'm just trying to do, just like day to day, having a clear mind, because those hours in the morning when you're like still setting yourself up to do all of the things you have to do, so crucial. And so to be able to do that with a clear mind is like, I've seen it change the way my day goes. And then going back to what I feel is my whole like central part of our conversation is that motivation. What's my clear motivation? I have no interest in doing things mindlessly anymore. I have no interest in doing things without a clear reason and why as to why I'm doing it. And so day to day, that would be like, my motivation for today is to make sure that I accomplish just like one thing. Sometimes it's like a really simple thing, like I have to finish writing this paper, or meet with a friend and like have lunch, and like, because those things are important, right? Keep cultivating friendships. And then the last thing is like the plan. I love my to-do list, Michelle. And I see it purpose already in my when I was talking, is that my to-do list is a promise to myself. And so what I try not to do is to break those promises. Like if I put something down, I've promised myself I'm going to do it. And so my goal is not to break those promises to myself. And those things cultivate character as well. It's like if I learn to keep promises to myself, then I can keep commitments as well. So yeah, that was my very short answer.
I hate how you've come up with a whole other conversation right at the end. You're like learning how to keep promises to yourself. Oh God,
this is
a whole other topic.
To invite me back. I was just living a tidbit.
I see what you're doing.
Yes.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Takhona, for this. And I think there's a lot to take away from this. I really do hope at this point people have been taking notes, because there's so much wisdom, and I can just imagine how hard it is, especially like at your age, because we're the same age. So relatively so, it's so old. Hard. I know we're very old. Yeah. And it's really hard to be not ahead of your time. I don't want to say ahead of your time, but like think about things so deeply when everything, well, when your whole circle or everything around you just seems to be, let's go. So yeah, thank you so much for your like openness and vulnerability in this. And I'm pretty sure it will help someone. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there who have these goals privately. Like I said, it looks like we're all moving mad, but I'm pretty sure there's so many different things are happening in private, because the narrative doesn't allow us for us to really get into this. So yeah, thank you for being open about your gray areas, about the kings. And
yes, thank you so much for having me. This was exciting. And I'm going to be keeping up with this podcast, because I think you're doing something really great here.
Thank you. Yeah. And this was a great first episode. Thank you so much for everyone who's been listening. And I will add Takhona's social media details if she allows me. Yeah, so that you can give her a follow, and you can follow her motivation and so on. She's a really interesting person. She's always doing something new. And yeah, for those who want to slide in the DM,
hey King.
For now, take care, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.